Prioritizing sleep is the low-hanging fruit, and prioritizing sleep means getting devices out of the bedroom for parents and children. So I always start with parents on this one because it's much easier to model that behavior, to say like, hey, I'm realizing I'm doom scrolling before bed, or I'm realizing the first thing I do is reach for my phone in the morning. So I'm going to put it out in a different room in the house.
So you are the screen time consultant and the founder of Tech Intentional. What do you do and why?
That's a great question. I am a former teacher and I care deeply about protecting children. And so one of the ways that I have found to most effectively do that is to advocate for more intentional use of technology, both at home and at school.
Okay, so there's a lot of different layers to that, right?
Yes.
Because I typically think in terms of toxic screen use. So that's smartphone, social media, video games. We can get into a lot more distinctions, but that's, I think, the biggest negative influence. How do you address that?
Yeah. So I say not all screen time is created the same, right? I mean, I think if you're FaceTiming with grandma, that's really different than scrolling through TikTok for 30 minutes. So part of it is there's a lot of nuance to this. I always say I'm not anti-tech, I'm tech intentional. I mean, obviously, here we are in different states having a conversation over a screen. I tend to focus on things. So my TLDR of being tech intentional, too long, don't read, is later is better, less is more, relationships and skills before screens. So in that context, thank you. Yeah, in that context, it comes down a lot to making sure that we're using the devices or the screens, not being used by them, which is very challenging because the business model fundamentally wants us to use them. So it's a bit of like both understanding that it's not a fair fight, but also as adults, honing our skills, and as children, helping teach them skills.
When it comes to technology, I'm a curmudgeonly old man. So my basic rule of thumb is never get your child a smartphone. I'll be curious to hear your take on that.
Yeah. I mean, I respect that. I know a lot of people, not a lot, I know a handful of people who've waited and delayed or don't give their kid a smartphone. But here's the thing, this is what I hear so much from parents is you could be doing everything right in the home. You could be delaying screen time. They could not be watching shows, no video games, nothing. And then they go to school and the school gives them a Chromebook or an iPad.
Yeah.
So on the one hand, this is what I try to straddle this challenge, because it's really not just an in the home problem. It's also now being given by schools. And so ideally, no children should have smartphones, but in reality, most of them do, even as young as 6, 7, 8 years old now. And so that is problematic, because even if your child doesn't, that if they go to someone's house or riding the school bus, they're in, at a play date, like there are going to be screens around. So it's sort of, we can do all the things right, like limit and say no, but we also have to recognize they're still going to be exposed to things. And it's our job to sort of help prep them for that.
How do you do that?
Great question. Conversations and relationships and prioritizing non-digital skills first. That's what I would say. So, it's going to be, I mean, just like anything in parenting, we're the sort of our children's first teacher is how I see it, as like, we get to teach them things like, how do you behave at a restaurant? How do you put your dishes in the dishwasher? Like a lot of what parenting is setting them up for life skills. And because technology is such a big part of life, we have to prepare them also for what that world is like. And our part of our role as parents is establishing our values, making clear what's within our family's values, what's okay, what's not okay, because they're going to encounter situations where their values are challenged or questioned, and they need to feel that they know how to respond to that. That's hard, to be clear. It's not an easy thing to do, but it matters.
What I found is one of the biggest challenge when attempting to help parents is they just have very narrow bandwidth. They're very busy. They need a very simple, clear solution.
Yes.
So what do you like? What's the low hanging fruit that you can offer?
Yes, great question. Sleep. Prioritizing sleep is the low hanging fruit, and prioritizing sleep means getting devices out of the bedroom for parents and children. So I always start with parents on this one because it's much easier to model that behavior, to say like, hey, I'm realizing I'm doom scrolling before bed, or I'm realizing the first thing I do is reach for my phone in the morning. So I'm going to put it out in a different room in the house. Or even, I mean, even baby steps, right? Like put it on the other side of the bedroom, put it outside the bedroom door. Just a lot of people are like, it's my alarm clock. Well, alarm clocks are way cheaper and they're not internet connected, and they work really reliably. So get an alarm clock and then talk about that with your children. Hey, I notice when phone's out of the room at night, I sleep better. So, and we know there's so much research about the benefits of good sleep on so many factors. So it's to me, that's the low hanging fruit. That's an easy starting point.
Yeah. First, from a psychological perspective, I think that's absolutely right. Sleep
Yeah.
is the number one thing for mental and physical health.
Yes. And
So,
we all understand that as adults, where we wish we're like, why did I not sleep more as a child? Now I want to sleep more as an adult.
yeah, right. Okay, what's number two?
That's a great question. So for parents in particular, I really recommend what I call living your life out loud, which is narrating what you do as you do it anytime it comes to digital media. And so it's like, I'm reaching for my phone. I'm going to check what time soccer practice starts. I'm going to see how bad the traffic is. I'm going to see if we need to pick up your friend. Then I'm going to check my email because I think I was expecting this message from your coach. You just narrate it. It's a play by play. You can also layer in the emotional component. So I'm standing in line in the grocery store and I'm bored. I'm opening my Instagram. Now I'm scrolling. I don't know why I'm doing this. This doesn't make me feel better. Now I'm comparing myself. Giving our children a sense of how we use these devices as tools, but also really as entertainment and distraction, I think is extremely important for modeling for our kids how we use the technology. So the living your life out loud, again, that's a parenting strategy. It's how, and it doesn't have to be just parents, by the way. We can do this for non-parents too. My husband does it at work sometimes, and he'll say, he's like, I notice that no one else is doing it. And it feels very weird that no one else is saying what they're doing. We all know that feeling of being phubbed when someone's like phone snubbing us, they look
Yeah.
down. So really bringing awareness and accountability to it for ourselves and then inviting others to join us.
And from a psychological point of view, what that does is break the automaticity, because these smartphones are so addictive.
Yes.
And we are addicted. If we have a smartphone, we're probably almost certainly addicted.
Yes.
So there's the automatic checking, and by vocalizing
Yes.
our actions, that requires intentionality and
Yes.
deliberation. So
Yes.
we're breaking the automatic
Yeah.
cycle.
Oh, wonderful. Yeah, that's a great way to connect it to psychology, because I'm not a psychologist by training, but I just know that it when we say
Yeah.
something out loud, we're bringing an awareness to it. And
Exactly.
again, these devices are designed to be compelling. They're designed to keep us scrolling and coming back and clicking and refreshing. And so interfering or
Yeah.
interrupting that dopamine feedback is extremely difficult for adults, right? Look at how many adults struggle with this. And so to think that children can, self-manage is just from, I would assume, a brain development standpoint, not even possible. Like they're still developing these skills. So it's not a simple matter of just saying, put your phone away, child, and them saying, okay, sure, I'll put it away. It doesn't work. If it worked that way, we wouldn't be having this conversation.
Exactly. So it's a catch-22, because the ability to inhibit impulsive behavior is a function of the prefrontal cortex, which is the last part of the brain to develop, doesn't develop until the mid-20s.
Yes.
So it's a catch-22.
Exactly.
Exactly. So the other function of what you described of living your life out loud is what we call self-monitoring, which is simply paying attention to your behaviors.
Yeah.
And that by itself is a research-supported effective intervention for reducing bad habits.
Oh, cool.
So it's the first step of many psychological treatments, like whether from weight loss to anxiety reduction. Just self-monitor. So that's what you're doing there.
That's so cool. I actually learned it from a colleague who we worked at a center for kids with ADHD, and she used it as a way of helping them build executive function skills, which, again, we all have executive function skills, and we all need to be developing and working on skills throughout life. So I just thought, oh, that's genius. Like we could take it and apply it to technology, like how we're using it. Because again, you imagine a young child like looking at the back of a phone, doesn't know what we're doing. I mean, we could be writing our dissertation or scrolling through TikTok. Like it looks the same to a child too. So then there's that like reflective part where a child can see. I always say it's not a switchblade, it's a Swiss Army knife, right? Like the multi-tool aspect of our phone too.
Yeah, it would be a lot less dangerous if it was a switchblade
I know.
or a Swiss Army
I
knife.
know
So,
the irony, right? Yeah. Yeah.
so number one, protect sleep. Two, live your life out loud. What's number three?
Mm. It's a really good question. I mean, I'm going back to my TLDR, prioritizing relationships and skills before screens. I mean, I think to me that's just so true across the board, whether that's at home or at school. It's like the relationship you have with somebody determines what kind of a learning experience you're going to have, right? Whether, again, parent or teacher. And so, when we displace opportunities for relationship building with screens, we weaken that ability. And I think for teenagers, I think about parents who are always fighting with teens about screens. And I get it. I have 2 teenagers myself. But at the end of the day, as hard as it is, we want to preserve the relationship because we have to get through that conflict together. Um, because eventually they're not going to come to us. Eventually they're going to look outward for support or distraction or numbing or, solutions on the internet. And we want it to be us, the adults who care about them. Yeah.
So, what do you specifically provide as the screen time consultant?
Yeah. So for many years, I've done parent coaching, right? One-on-one to go really in depth to help parents kind of become more tech intentional. I did write a book called The Screen Time Solution, which is really a guide for parents about tech intentionality. And now I'm actually, my advocacy efforts about screens in schools has merged more into my coaching and consulting work. So I'm working with schools to help them reevaluate technology use at school. And I'm also looking to do a lot of like policy work around, holding companies accountable, getting them to, work better for children and not for profit, which is hard. I mean, that's a big one. So it's not going to happen overnight. And I started teaching at the seminar at the University of Washington this spring. So I'm working with undergraduates also about this topic. And that was extremely fulfilling.
What do you see for yourself as the path to have the biggest impact?
I really love speaking about this. I feel like as a parent and a former teacher, I kind of understand these different walks of life and can help kind of be a translator between the worlds. At the same time, I'm also very passionate about making change. And so my hope is that having a bigger speaking platform will give me the opportunity to affect change in other ways. So I'm looking to speak at conferences or keynotes or testify. I've done a few testimonies before different state legislatures to talk about harms of screens for children. So that's how I always joke that my memoir will be called The Accidental Activist, because I didn't mean to do a lot of the things I did. I just saw something that I thought was wrong and wanted to fix it and make it right. So that's what I do.
Well, those are the best types of activists, in
Yes.
my opinion.
Yeah. Yeah. And one of the beautiful things about this work is that it's a really nonpartisan issue. I feel like I work with
Yeah.
people from A to Z, and it's actually very heartwarming to come together and be like, I might not agree with these people on everything, but we agree on this. And that, I don't know, that's a really powerful experience to be in a room and say, and an important experience, I think, to be in a room with people that I might not always agree with, but be able to say we can work together to make change.
Yeah, it's a little bit encouraging to know that common sense can bring us together.
Yes, right? I agree. I know a lot of this is just sort of like, this just makes sense. It's just like, sometimes I get frustrated because I'm like, why do we have to prove that these things are bad for kids when they're so
Exactly.
so
Exactly.
obviously bad? Or
Yeah. Yeah.
like, why do we need research to prove that? Just look,
Yeah. Yeah.
So I'm with you on that. Yes.
How'd you get in front of the state legislatures?
So through a lot of the advocacy work I do, I'm connected to Fair Play, which used to be the Campaign for Commercial-Free Childhood, and they have a lot of advocacy groups. So I work on the Screens in Schools group, and we have
Cool.
different, just different, again, most of them are just concerned parents who are trying to bring this issue in front of legislators. And again, no surprise, technology changes really fast. And some of our politicians have been in office for many, many years and are not hip to the technology that currently exists. So there's need for a lot of education about it as well. So I just had a couple of different activists, friends in Vermont was actually where I testified initially. But yeah, and it's a bit of I'm learning how to do it. You have to figure out when the hearings are and who who is the chair of the whatever committee, and then it's a process for me as well, sort of a crash course in democracy.
Yeah. So you published a book. There's a lot of work that goes into that.
Yeah.
Could you share a little bit with our audience? What is the thesis of that book? What you hope to accomplish in it?
Yeah. So the subtitle, it's called The Screen Time Solution, and then it's a judgment-free guide to becoming a tech intentional family. And I really wanted to emphasize that this is really hard and you're not alone. And there are some really practical things we can do as families. Um, and yeah, and the thesis is, I hope, one of both information and education and hope and optimism, that like, okay, this is hard. It's also, I always say it's not our fault, but it's our responsibility. It's like we didn't create these products. And, some people will be like, well, you gave the kids the products, but like they're addictive and they're designed to be that way. So it's a little bit like once parents give them, it's actually very difficult to take them back. It doesn't mean we shouldn't try, but I think it's just trying to make sure that parents know that I'm not judging and I'm not shaming you, because I think at the end of the day, what we really want is to be better parents for our kids and help our kids be better future adults. And so that's the goal of the book, is really to just kind of give parents some practical tools. And it's a choose your own adventure a bit. Like not all of it's going to apply to your particular family. So you take the things that work and go with that.
Can you share one nugget with us, one practical tool, high impact?
Well, living your life out loud is definitely one of them. But here's another one. This one I learned from a parent educator that I just loved, and it's so disarming. So it's the phrase, "I forgot to teach you." And so, for example, like let's say we're at a restaurant and our teenager pulls out his phone and we're like, "Hey, I forgot to teach you that when we're at a restaurant, it's really rude to look at your phone when you're, the waiter's here trying to take your order. It's really rude to have your phone in your hand. I forgot to teach you that." That sounds so different than saying like, "Put your phone away. I can't believe how rude you are," right? Like you can convey the same message without the shaming and the blaming. And again, if the goal of our work as parents is to teach our children skills, I mean, to love them too, of course, but like, that's the teaching part, right? And it's okay to blame ourselves. It's okay. I say to my kids, you can blame me if your friends are like, why don't you have a phone, or why don't you have Snapchat? Say it's my fault. Say my mom's so mean. I'm okay with that. I'm comfortable with that because I know I'm doing it for them, right? And so
Yeah.
it's a little bit of that, like disarming it, and it goes back to the relationship piece, right? Like I can say, "Oh, this is on me. I forgot to teach you that." That allows me to continue the teaching.
I love that extreme ownership. That's a very important quality as a leader, and the parents are the leaders of the household.
Exactly.
A couple challenges in this area
Yeah.
are, so first of all, I'm going to say what's not the challenge. I think, and I'm saying this because I want your opinion,
Yeah.
but I used to think the challenge was in the intellect, basically ignorance, not knowing the problems and so forth. And it's certainly true that there's a lot of naivety. Parents don't understand how dangerous these things are. But what I've come to realize is clarifying the ignorance doesn't actually result in behavior change. So it seems to me that the problems are more so parental anxiety. So, and it's all misplaced. I mean, it's right intention misplaced, but they're afraid of physical dangers over digital dangers. They're afraid of peer pressure, what other people will think, of what their child will think.
Yes.
And then I think the other challenge is in the will, which is just kind of like a delegation of responsibility, an abdication of responsibility, that parents just are not doing what they deep down know is best for their kids.
I agree. I mean, I understand what you're saying. I actually wrote about this in the book as well. And the dichotomy that I use to explain it is this idea of scary versus dangerous. And
Nice. I love that.
Right. And one of the things that I was so shocked when I read this a couple of years ago, I think it was Pew Research found that the top 3 parenting fears in America are youth mental health, bullying, and kidnapping. And what's shocking to me is that one of those things is not like the other. And if you actually Lenore Skenazy, who's the founder of Let Grow movement, which is all about independence and childhood and free play, in her book, she cites the statistic that like kidnapping is so statistically rare that it is almost nil from a statistical standpoint. And so, somebody in her book gives a stat that if you wanted your child to be kidnapped, obviously we don't, but if you did, you would have to leave them outside every day on the curb for 750,000 years to be
Yeah,
guaranteed of being
that's right.
kidnapped. But you give them Snapchat access, and within 5 minutes, they will be pushed harmful content, right? Like, so again, I think this is, there's a lot of this sentiment going around that we overprotect in the real world and underprotect in the digital one. And I think, to your point, that is a lot about parental anxiety, which is, in my view, made worse because of cultural stuff, is for sure, but also our own 24/7 clickbait as adults. So
Yes.
parents who are attached to their phones are we're not watching news at 5 o'clock once a day anymore, or getting a newspaper once a day. We are getting 24/7 news headlines. And the only way to keep it interesting is to put the clickbait up front and center, right? That's how those news channels are functioning, whether it's on Instagram or cable news, right? And so we hear the worst of the worst of the worst. We hear the statistically rare circumstance of, something happening. And that makes us feel like in the real world, that's an actual threat. Now, I mean, there are safety things. Like, I think it's really interesting if parents are giving their kids phones, because I hear this all the time, to keep them safe, right? To prevent kidnapping. Remember that number 3 fear. The irony is you're actually making number 1 and 2 worse, bullying and youth mental health, by giving kids phones, right? And I would add, you're making them physically less safe, because what do we see? We see kids walking around the streets with phones in their faces, not paying attention to traffic, not aware of their surroundings, not talking to their neighbors. So I think, again, that's scary versus dangerous. Like, parents think the real world is scary, but for the most part, it's not dangerous. And that's a hard one. That's because that's not what we feel. But
Exactly.
factually, it's true. It's never been safer in many ways.
Exactly. So, do you have like a structured way of helping parents through this journey?
Yeah, when I do parent consulting, I do it for no fewer than, it has to be 8 sessions minimum, because to me, this isn't a short-term
Oh,
fix. This is a long-term changing how we parent and think about screen time. And a lot of it starts with education. Again, I come at this as with my teacher heart, because that's what I do. That's what I am. And I find, like, as you point out, a lot of this is an information lapse or a misunderstanding or not knowing the dangers, and then empowering parents to sort of reclaim some of their parental authority, right? To say, like, actually, I'm the adult and it's okay for me to say no. And I'm a big fan of validating children's feelings. I think that's extremely important. I love that we are doing that now. And we are forgetting that the second part of that is saying, and I believe in your ability to persevere through struggle.
exactly.
Yeah. So we have to
Exactly.
do that second part. We have to say, ooh, I can see this situation really upset you and made you uncomfortable, and I know you can handle it. Or here are the skills that we are going to work on to help you get through it.
Well, that's very insightful because there's a whole parenting treatment for child anxiety based on that premise. It's called supportive parenting for anxious childhood emotions.
Oh,
And you
is it
captured
said?
it perfectly.
Yes, yes, right. Is that, or PDA? Is that the other
I'm,
parental? What is it? Demand? What, avoidance? What is that called? Yeah,
I'm not
pathological
familiar
demand
with,
avoidance. Well, it's not in the
okay. I'm not
DSM, but
familiar
it's
with
like a
that one.
social media phenomenon of it's called PDA, and pathological demand avoidance, where you don't you if you say no, if you set limits, if you don't indulge your child, you trigger their nervous system, and then they can't handle the real world. And I have my opinions on that. I imagine you do as well. Like, it's I have deep concerns for children that don't have boundaries, clear rules. Children need that. They don't necessarily want it, but they need it.
Well, you're just making them weaker. They're just atrophying. Their souls, their wills are atrophying if we don't do
Yeah.
that.
And then when they grow up and they become teenagers with mental health crises and they're turning to social media, like, we're just adding fuel to a fire.
And what's going to happen when is their boss expected to pamper them?
Exactly.
So
Yeah,
we're just setting them up for failure. So
exactly.
anything else you want to share with our audience, Emily?
Oh gosh, this has been a really great conversation. I just think, my message is one of optimism and, hope for parents, that, like, I just believe that when we know better, we do better, and that this is about kind of looking at our family and what kind of children do we want what kind of adults do we want our children to be? And are we modeling that as adults ourselves? Like that this isn't about judging and shaming. It's about saying, hey, I could do this better. And to start with small things, right? We're not going to go home and change everything all at once. It's baby steps. It's getting our phones out of the bedroom. Step one, right? And that might take a month, and that's okay.
Sure. Yeah. And if people want to engage your consulting services, do you mind just like laying out what you would cover in those 8 sessions?
Yeah. So a lot of it is very bespoke because it depends on the family. Like if it's a child who's under 10, I'm going to approach it really differently than if it's a teenager. So a lot of the under 10 is going to be a lot more in the preventative. It's talking about brain development. We talk about persuasive design. We talk about actually one of the first things we talk about are family values. Just let's talk about them. Have you had this conversation with your family? Like what are the things that are important to you, and having kids help define those. And to be clear, I only work with parents because my belief is that if I teach the parents teach the children. And so
Exactly.
that's I want to empower parents to make those changes. I can't come in once and say something and have it be fixed, And then, again, too, it also really depends. Like sometimes families are thinking about who engage the coaching or thinking about it before they give devices. And they want to know, like, what do I need to know before I give a phone or iPad or whatever? And some of the families engage me after that's happened and there's huge issues, right? So I also say I'm not a licensed mental health professional, and I make sure that if there are mental health issues going on, that they have other support because I can't treat or, recommend for that. But, I've worked with more than one family who've actually gone through sort of iPad detox, so to speak. And again, not I can't do it from the mental health angle, but like just thinking about what would it take to remove it? How do we establish boundaries and rules in our house to set our kids up for success with this? How do we tolerate their, unhappiness with this? What are the, ways we can keep them busy when they're not doing an iPad that they normally would be doing? So yeah, it's an ongoing process. I find that even after 8 sessions, which isn't necessarily 8 weeks, sometimes I spread it out every other. So it's almost 4 months sometimes. Sometimes parents still want to come back for a tune-up because children's developmental needs change, right? And then you have to kind of revisit this. But the hope is to give parents a really solid foundation for how to build as the kids grow.
Well, you're doing really important work, and I just
Thank
encourage
you.
you to keep it up.
Yes, thank you so much. I really appreciate it. And I am ironically on social media. So if people want to find me there under the Screen Time Consultant, I have a team that helps me post, and I don't do it all myself, but I do that and all of this information. We're actually about to relaunch a new website. So that's all coming very literally in the next few weeks. So excited to share that.
Great. Thank you, Emily.
You're very welcome. Thank you for having me.